All right. So last but not least, again, I'm gonna keep this as brief as I possibly can. Let's see how we do. I've already shared this with all of you. This is one more classmate example. She's writing about the Hunger Games, obviously. What we're looking at is an introduction and the first body paragraph. So what I'm going to ask you to do, well, I suppose I'll give you a couple directions first. Um, the whole point of this, if you want to call it a workshop, even though I'm just talking at you, the point here is I want to, as quickly and concisely as I can, underscore the most important elements of writing our papers. Okay, so this is going to come down to two primary concerns. Number one, structure, which I think all told we're doing pretty well here actually. Um, but then number two, argument, and that last one is a little more nebulous, a little more. It's harder to pin down, right? Because it's all very dependent upon context, which is my fancy way of saying it depends. Um, anyway, what I want you to do, you'll probably have to pause at a couple points in this video, and the first one is coming up. All I want you to do, you're going to read over the introduction with two things in mind. Number one, as I just alluded to, structure. Do we have sort of all the parts that we need? This is the hook, if you want one. Then you have to introduce the text, you need a roadmap, and you need a thesis. Do we have those parts? Number two, how good a job do you think are those parts doing, right? Could they be improved? Do you see an opportunity anywhere for like expansion or anything like that? Take your best shot, pause it here for a second, and take care of those two things. All right. I assume you paused and you're back, and if you didn't, I mean, here again, uh, whatever you want, man, I guess. All right, so what do we have? We do pretty much have all the parts here, right? We have um, a bit of a hook. You know, I think sometimes you guys have a weird bar when it comes to a hook, and I think a lot of this is due to because the definition is like it has to be interesting or engaging, and and the only experience most of you have with something that fits that bill is like major Hollywood movies or TV shows, right? And that's my way of saying your hook doesn't have to have an explosion in it. This is fine. We're talking about the genre in general with dystopian novels. Dystopia, by the way, is just the opposite of a utopia, right? Um, and redefine expectations for masculinity in literature. So obviously, she's beginning to introduce, she's sort of tying her hook into this larger conversation she wants to have about something to do with dystopian novels. And then, lo and behold, in the very next sentence, in the Hunger Games by that lady, immediately we're into the introduction of the text. Now, I'm okay with it. I will say, I mean, it gives us some opportunities. The length of the introduction of her text. If you want to be super technical, you could say it's this long. I mean, again, truth be told, and I've done this, you know, in papers I've written. So again, I don't necessarily, but it goes right, and it kind of bleeds into the roadmap. Again, I'm not saying it's a huge problem. As a matter of fact, I think it's okay. But I just want you guys to be aware, like a lot of this will feel like summary, but I do think what the author's doing here is she's kind of laying out important pieces of information that she's then going to talk about in her paper. And I say that because of where we go next, which is the thesis. And I'm going to help you guys because I worry some of you may not quite be able to follow it. I suppose you could really say it's the last two sentences, huh? All right, so what are we looking at here? We talk about dystopian literature. I mean, okay, what, I don't care. We're really just talking about the Hunger Games. Um, we want to italicize that, by the way. But anyway, thematic trends relating to the value of gender norms. That's a really fancy way of saying we're talking about gender norms. We could probably simplify a lot of that. But the real money is in our next sentence. Because of the societal needs of an impoverished dystopian setting, because people are poor and you need certain things when you're poor, hegemonic masculinity, hegemony, by the way, if you look that up, we're talking about power again, right? Control, who has it, is valued over femininity, which they're kind of implying it's in like a subservient role there. And this has led to the creation of a new trope in contemporary dystopia, the fierce yet desirable heroine, who's obviously Katniss. Um, so what are they really saying there? They're getting at something, but it isn't, I would say, entirely spelled out. And I think again, part of the reason is they don't quite get into it here. Here's what I think is going on. And again, this is one-sided, and I apologize because you guys can't talk back to me here. But number one, we do have all the parts. We have all the structural bits that we need. That's good. You got to do that. Number two, the only issue I see with the argument, and by the way, there's an argument here, and sometimes that's even a struggle for people. So well done there, okay? But if we're thinking about making this as good as it can be, our primary issue here is I think we get a little bogged down in the summary, right? And we just never quite dig into anything, even though we're laying out all this information. We never quite say why any of it matters. I think, sorry about that. I think we, to be totally honest with you, I think part of the issue is we get stuck in this bit of a rut where we're comparing Katniss to Peeta. Again, I think that is part of their argument, but I don't think it has to be a huge part of it. Not least of which because that's just not, I mean, that is and isn't what their thesis is concerned with. And here's what I mean by that. I understand, and I'm working from memory. I got dragged to see the first movie when I was dating my wife, right? So like, I I do remember it well enough. Um, I know that Katniss is a masculine character, and I know that Peeta is not. Anyone who's ever seen that movie or read the books, I imagine, would agree with that. Okay, cool. We don't need to spend a lot of time laying that out. Now we can talk about the significance of that difference, and again, we're starting to do that a little bit. But the bulk of our time here is, wow, she's really masculine, and wow, he's really not. We don't have that time. Okay. What's more important, the big idea in this thesis that we're not really digging into in the introduction. Here again, I'm going to ask you to pause it and look over it. What's one big theme? If masculinity as opposed to femininity is one of our themes, right? What's the other one here? It's not dystopia, just to help you out. That's the genre. That's not. We're not actually super concerned with that either. I don't think. What theme though are we trying to consider? Go ahead and pause it, and if you can, think about that. Maybe even read the intro again. Go for it. All right. So you're back from that pause again, hopefully. Um, I'm wondering if you made a discovery. I'm hopeful. But it's this impoverished dystopian setting. It's the fact that they're poor. We don't really talk about that. I mean, we mention it specifically. Let me find it for you. Look, Katniss inhabits the poorest district, District 12, which specializes in coal. She's a coal miner, or at least that's her people, right? We have those people now. Most of them are in West Virginia. Um, what do we imagine those people are like? I mean, most of us don't know anyone from West Virginia, right? But we all have like a certain idea. You have a certain image of what that kind of person is and what they value and who they are. What does that ultimately spring from? A lot of it has to do with the fact that they're poor, right? So what are we doing? We're kind of, I think, well, we're trying to do one of two things. We're absolutely talking about the sort of narrative we have around people of lesser means, right? Man or woman, in this case, woman, right? We're kind of saying it seems like to be poor means you're gonna be a certain kind of way, right? That's the story around this kind of person. The second consideration is whether or not any of that has to do with dystopia, which it might. It very well may, because the whole idea of a dystopia in most cases, and it's true here, is that you have very few haves and a whole lot of have-nots. and usually the hero of the story is one of the have-nots. In this case, that's true, right? Um, but again, to be a have-not, to be poor, like Katniss is and her people are, it limits opportunities in the way that we've talked about, but what does that mean for the kind of woman she can be? Well, it seems like the suggestion here is she's going to be a really masculine one. Um, we don't really explain that before the thesis. Do you see what I'm saying? All the parts are there, and we keep kind of getting right up against it. We say, like, she is unemotional, gritty, and fierce, having been brought up in poverty. Again, we're implying there, and I'm sorry, I'll highlight what I just read. We're implying here the very argument I gave, right? But we don't quite say it. And again, we do it in the very next sentence. So I think if we trimmed some of the summary, we don't need a lot of this. And quite honestly, I don't think we need nearly as much Peeta. We're just saying he's not like her. And again, we all know that. You could say that pretty quickly and be done with it in the introduction, okay? And that's going to give you more time to explain this idea. Like, I think we're trying to say her masculine depiction stems from her economic background in the film. I think that's what we're saying. I'm not positive because it's not quite spelled out like that, but whatever the case is, we got to say it, and we're not quite doing that here. But again, we got all the parts. We do have an argument. It's just not quite spelled out as well as I would like. Okay. Okay. Second half. Same deal. You have a body paragraph here. Okay. Same two concerns. I want you to think about structure. And when it comes to a body paragraph, of course, it's different from an introduction. You need a topic sentence, you need evidence, and you need analysis. Special note on that when it comes to a research paper, right? You have a primary text, but you also have secondary sources. So you can have different pieces of evidence from different sources. Now, of course, you can always have too much evidence, so you want to watch for that. But that's just an addendum to our structure here. It still works the same: topic sentence, evidence, analysis. Second part: how are those things working here? Do they do what they need to do? I cover a lot of these concerns actually in the peer review questions and video that I put up before this. So if you have to think about that, or if you want to refer to your notes, that's a joke for me. Anyway, take a minute, go ahead and pause it here, read through this, we'll talk about it. All right, and we're back, hopefully. Anyway, let's look at the topic sentence first, right? We'll go all the way down. Where is it end? Ooh, it's a long one. My goodness, hang on. Oh, right there. Okay. Still rather long. In the Hunger Games. We know we're talking about the Hunger Games, right? We could lose that. It is clear that we could lose that. Okay, Katniss occupies a role of traditional masculinity within her familiar unit. I mean, just within her family would be fine, as well as in the games. And Peeta displays weaknesses ascribed to women. So already that trap that I was worried about, right, in the introduction, where we're just saying, man, she's like this, he's like that. We're comparing, contrasting. That, please don't do that, okay? Not least of which, I mean, the primary reason I gave a couple minutes ago, right? We know that. Anyone who has seen the movie, right? We think about a banal claim. If you approach them with this argument, would you find anyone that would disagree? Almost most assuredly no, right? We know that. Now, a quick note though. This is not to say, again, because this is how we draft, everybody does this. This is not to say you got to throw this out entirely. But what this means is this cannot be our primary concern. This can't be our main idea that she's this way and he's that way. Okay? What it probably means is this has something to do with what we want to talk about. But if we do our job in the rest of the paragraph, and I think that we do, then we're probably going to say something more about it. Translating all that, what I mean is, yes, Katniss is more masculine than Peeta, but so what? Why does that matter? What are we going to argue as a result of that pretty obvious observation, right? Well, let's see. Evidence. I get why we're doing it primarily because of how broad the topic sentence is. But our evidence, man, is really long and general, you know? Um, I and we're going to talk about that secondary source here in a second. To me, I would still much prefer something specific. Again, I'm using my memory here, but I know there are many moments throughout the film, which is what I believe they're talking about here, where they really want you to notice how much more masculine Katniss is, even before they ever get to these damn games, right? Like, uh, man, it's been a long time. Like, I went to see it in the theater with my not wife at the time, but wife now. Um, but she's like a damn blacksmith or something, isn't she? Like, it's like they so badly want you to know the kind of character she is that they are always signposting it, you know? Um, so you just pick something. Doesn't really matter. And there's plenty of scenes where they're together and you see that difference again because they want you to know that difference exists. Pick one of those. Shouldn't be too difficult, you know? Um, anyway, what do we end up doing without that specific evidence, right? Like, I mean, where's our evidence? It's probably here. Saves him, right? Okay, he's weak. He's more pure. Okay. All right, that's all of our evidence. None of it is specific, so that's an issue. But what do we say about it? That means our analysis is here. That's it, because that's another text, right? While this may initially appear as a strength, Katniss views Peeta's pondering, they don't mean pondering, they want another word, I'm not sure what it is, but they want another word, as useless to his survival in the games and somewhat naive. That's true, I'm pretty sure. I remember thinking that he was a useless character when I was watching the movie. Um, but again, that's pretty obvious. It might feel like I'm trying to bash the paper here. I'm not. What I'm trying to draw your attention to is, again, every time, like almost without fail, every time you give me evidence that's not specific, you don't have much to say about it. And here, we don't have much to say about it. If you gave me a very quick, just sort of context of a scene we see when they first get to the games, Peeta gets smacked around and Katniss uppercuts a guy. You know, I'm making something, but you get the point. Um, the guy says, "Oh, I can't believe a girl." Blah, you know, anything. Pick a moment that's going to give you not just more to say, but it's going to it gives you something to latch onto when it comes to explaining whatever your argument is. Okay, the more specific you are, the better off you will be, and we see that here. Now, again, we move to another text. A quick note on that: do not almost ever feel it necessary to give me the title. We don't need that. Okay. If I want the title, I'll go to your works cited. You know, I don't need that business. Just give me this person. Uh, so look, we could cut out all this, right, and we lose nothing from the sentence. China Ray Newman describes the shortcomings of Peeta's. See, immediately we're just into this person's argument. Do that. Anyway, what is their argument? Relates his weakness to a negative feminine stereotype. Okay, let's translate that before we get to the quotation. What we're saying here is not just is Peeta more feminine, again, because that's pretty clear, but that femininity, those aspects of his personality, are related to weakness. He is the weaker character because he is feminine, right? That's interesting. Um, again, we would have to say more than that, and I think that we do, but that's kind of a jumping off point. Like, why is the movie not just presenting these characters as different? Sorry, I'm talking a lot. I gotta take a drink. Not just why is the movie presenting these characters as sort of opposite gender stereotypes, okay? But why is the movie still presenting feminine stereotype as weakness, right? That's interesting. And we kind of get to that in this quotation. I'll highlight it for you. Even as the author lifts up agency within femininity. So basically, we take the feminine character, Katniss, and make her more powerful. She's in control. She has agency over herself. Collins reinforces ideas of feminine dependence and innocence through PETA, right? So again, to translate all that, while on the one hand she's saying women can do it all basically, because you see Katniss doing it all, the one who's more like what we expect of a woman, I'm gonna be honest with you, PETA's kind of a little bitch, right? You can't say that in your paper, but that is what we're saying, and that's kind of what, according to this Newman person, that's what we're saying about the feminine role, the person who's more coded feminine, whether they are in fact a man or a woman, is gonna be like PETA, is gonna be kind of useless. So we're kind of working against our own argument in a way, like with this powerful female character in Katniss. That's really cool. So let's talk about that. We don't yet, right? You kind of let Newman make the point when I think you could make that point. Again, with more specific evidence, first of all. So what do we do with that? Well, we start, right? Well, hell, sorry. There we go. He's got some strengths, okay? He's a burden. That's the point we're trying to make. I could almost guarantee there's a scene where he's a damn burden. God, he's a burden through the whole movie. I hate that character. I don't know what this political leader. I don't know. I that doesn't. I don't know if that has anything to do with their argument. Yeah, and they finally get to. They seem to agree with Newman, right? So here's what we can do. I think, I'm pretty sure, this argument was in their heart the whole time. It took them, like I keep saying to you guys, it took them writing this whole thing, maybe even pulling that quotation from Newman, and they got to it. That's what they want to talk about. That's really interesting. So rewrite the topic sentence with that idea, get some specific evidence, delete most or all of this other evidence because it's just not helping. It's getting in your way. Find a place where PETA is a damn burden, which won't be hard. And talk to me about that specifically. Find a detail in the scene that talks about any or all of these ideas, and I think all of you are capable. That's the trick. Okay. I'm going to sum everything up just because I love doing that for you guys. Number one, again, we have all the parts, both in the introduction and the body paragraph. We got all the parts we need. That's half the battle. The second half, though, can be a little more difficult. What kind of a job are we doing with those parts? Well, pretty good to start with the introduction of the text, but it probably goes on a little long, which is to say you do need to talk about specifics from the text, which we're doing up here, but we don't provide nearly as much argument. We don't explain why any of the information we're given here in the introduction matters, what it has to do with what we want to talk about, and it seems to have something to do with her economic background, perhaps even as a result of the setting. I think we can, it's just not here yet. In the body paragraph, same as everything else we've looked at this semester. I keep telling you guys you're going to do this. In your topic sentence, you don't really know what you want to say. This one feels close because it sounds all fancy, okay? But number one, we can cut a lot off the top just because we don't need it. And then number two, what are we left with? What are we really saying? Katniss is masculine, PETA is not. That's a banal claim, right? We back it up with pretty general, trying to think about the whole movie at once evidence, which we don't want to do. And why don't we want to do it? Because again, it leaves us with nothing to say. Okay. Don't bother giving me the title of an article, but then we have a really good quotation from that article, a very specific, by the way, quotation, which gives us something to say, something to talk about. And what that means now, we have finally discovered the argument we wanted the whole time in this paragraph. We go back, we rewrite how much of this thing? At least that much, right? Because that's our topic sentence. That's our evidence. We need better evidence. And then, if you want to start with this for your analysis, that's fine. But you got to have more to say than that, right? And I think we do. not just that PETA is not feminine, or rather that PETA is feminine and Katniss is not, which is what we would expect, but weirdly subverting gender expectations on the one hand, but then hardcore reinforcing other aspects of gender roles, and why they're doing that, or why that's going on, or what that suggests about how any of this works. That's what we're trying to do in this paragraph, and I think we can, right? That's the goal. That's what we're trying to do in this paper. I kept that as brief as I could. I purposely did not watch the clock because I usually bum myself out when I do that. Last couple bits of business, and then I'll let you guys go. Number one, if possible, I get emails about this all the time. I don't know if you get them as well. If you'd please knock out a course evaluation sometime here in the next couple days. I'm gonna be honest with you. If you don't do it like right now, as I'm asking you, you probably won't. I know I wouldn't remember to do it, but I'll just put it out there. Um, they're helpful. They're not helpful in the way that like you may think they are. Those numbers and stuff. That stuff's not super helpful. I got to write a report at one point. It's really awful about the numbers you give me, like it's a Yelp review. But especially the comments. Anybody wants to leave me comments, that's always really helpful, especially if they're constructive. You guys have a funny opinion on what constructive might mean sometimes. Um, so, for instance, and again, think about if you've ever read a review for a product, like on Amazon, or again, like for a restaurant, if you've looked at Yelp, anything, most of the people who bother leaving feedback are pissed off, right? That's just the nature of it. Um, and frankly, I wish teachers had told me this in the past because I never thought about it this way, and I usually enjoyed my classes, and I would just kind of say that and move on. Um, but I didn't realize that most people don't leave comments, and those that do are pissed off for one reason or another, which means most comments that people get are terrible. Uh, like the best one I ever got, this is at Alabama. They just insulted my wife. You know what I mean? Like there are some monsters out there. Um, and that's my way of saying if there was something you enjoyed about the class or you found helpful or whatever, you can say that too. Like that helps me. That sort of tells me in the face of whatever other nonsense I might get on my feedback. Oh, I need to make sure to try to keep that or do something like that again. You know, because it seemed to help a couple people. Um, that's really what the feedback is for. And none of my teachers ever really explained it to me that way, so I try to point that out. Um, in terms of the class itself, you know, again, I've heard from a couple people that like maybe you felt like I pushed you too hard or something along those lines. I do apologize if that was the case at any point. Um, I don't mean to make it overly difficult. I do mean to challenge you. And I understand there can be a fine line between the two, and we may cross it upon occasion. And again, I apologize if that's the case. Um, but I do worry that sometimes, especially in core classes, especially in college, um, you don't really get challenged very much. Um, and I mean, things may be changing. Things may be different from when I was a student, but I honestly thought then, and I think now that that's the point to college is to be challenged. Um, I mean, some of you may disagree with me, and that's a bummer because that doesn't say very many good things about where we might be headed. But I still maintain that that's the reason you're here is to, you know, put it another way, maybe occasionally get your ass kicked, you know, intellectually, but you get up and you work through it, and I do believe you're better for it, and that's kind of what we're here to do. Um, regarding the material we talked about this semester, I always try to make it a point to pick subjects, themes that I feel like we take for granted. So, like in my 1101, the past couple semesters, they've been about social media and how we use it and what it does to us and how we view people, stuff like that. And again, just like talking about masculinity, I think it's one of those topics that's everywhere. It's all over the world we live in, but because of that, we just kind of we take it for granted. I can't think of a better way to say it. Like, and what that means is we never really examine it. We never really consider where any of this comes from, or how it shapes us, or any of that. And so that's why I like to teach these classes, because it's subjects we all know very well, but weirdly we don't at the same time. And my hope is by having you guys do that for a semester, you're then able to, at some point, go out in the world, investigate similar ideas. You know, there's so much in the world that you are asked to just accept and not question and not investigate. Um, but if you approach it in the ways that we talk about in this class, I think that you can, and I think that you should. I think it's there's value in that. Um, so anyway, that's what I'm always aiming for. That was my hope this semester. Other than that, I hope everyone is well. Uh, I know, again, especially in summer, things can be kind of stressful. Um, I would offer that we're almost done. We're not at the finish line, but we can definitely see it. So pace yourselves the best you can. Try not to stress too much, and just know here in a couple days, no matter what happens, it'll be over. It'll be behind you. All right. Thank you guys very much. Take it easy.